Part 7. After wearing the book, I became the group favorite. Author, Little Ginger. Chapter 61. Chapter 61 Compromise. For the first time in his 28-year life, Fujianexai was panicked and at a loss. Every time he faced Zhang Xiaoxi, he could only compromise, show Guanyang's throat, and I'll take you to the old house. Zhang Xiao nodded with sobs. Guanyang followed behind, heard the conversation between the two, and pressed his temples. Only the girl Xiao Xiao could make the boss look like this. The only one who could make the boss compromise was this girl. This girl's arrogant temper also looks very much like someone. After a lot of trouble. After Guanyang looked at Zhang Xiaoxi's throat and said it was okay, Fujianexai actually drove Zhang Xiaoxi to his old house in person. The old man came out to pick her up with a smile. When I was little, Grandpa's good granddaughter, how come she hasn't looked so haggard for only a few hours? I feel so sorry for Grandpa. Zhang Xiao's face was indeed very haggard. The red rash on his fair face had not faded away, the corners of his lips were bloodless, and the circles under his eyes were red and swollen. He seemed to have no energy no matter how he looked. In addition, his body was thin. This kind of morbid weakness dared to be stronger. Zhang Xiao forced a smile and said, "Grandpa, I'm so tired. You can see that I'm much more energetic than I was in the morning." Mr. Fu felt sorry for her, so he followed her words and said, "Well, Grandpa, my eyes are dim. Come in quickly before it's freezing outside." Okay. Zhang Xiao followed the old man and turned around and entered the villa without even looking back at Fujianexai. Fujianexai looked at Zhang Xiaoxi's back with cold eyes, and his frown relaxed slightly. Guanyang office. Third brother, are you serious? Did Xiao Xiao really confront the boss? And Nangxuan originally came to see Zhang Xiaoxi, but unexpectedly, he was sent away by Fujianexai. Guanyang rescued the humanoid skull in his office from Nangxuan's hands and replied in a calm voice, "Well, the boss has compromised." And Nangxuan had a gossipy face, took out a cigarette and lit it, and the smoke filled the air. Only a child can push the boss to this level. Sure enough, all strong men have ribs. Obviously, a child will be the boss's lifelong weakness. Everything must be reversed, and the boss must be measured. Otherwise, with his young temper, the next time his temper comes up, it may not be solved by compromise. Guanyang looked at Nangxuan with disgust and opened the window. Nangxuan blew out a smoke ring, was silent for a while and said, "Lao San, Xiao will be 18 in less than a month. The boss can't control himself. His love for Xiao has penetrated deep into the bone marrow and cannot be reversed. It's too late to guide it slowly, and it's very likely that it will rebound." Guanyang pushed up his glasses, looked at the scenery outside the window, and finally his eyes fell on a certain car. He said in a cold voice, "Even so, the boss will still do that, right? They have too many obstacles to face later." And Nangxuan pursed his lips and said nothing. They all knew in their hearts how long Fujianexai had been waiting for that day. He would build a castle to put Zhang Xiaoxi inside and give her all the best things. He would remove all obstacles. It's just that he forgot whether the little girl would accept everything he gave. Perhaps for the little girl, everything he gave her was a cage that trapped her. And Nangxuan fell into silence. The cigarette in his hand was suddenly taken away. He raised his head and squinted his eyes, looking at Fujianexai, who was already shrouded in smoke. "Boss, are you sending me away?" Fu Chen's slender eyebrows were furrowed, his whole body was wrapped in cold air, and his whole body was filled with the aura of keeping strangers away. Ouch. The last chapter, I finally kicked him out. Good night, babies. End of this chapter. After wearing the book, I became the group favorite. Author, Little Ginger. Chapter 62. Chapter 62. She was very resistant. "Boss, don't be too impatient," Guanyang said. Fu Chenxiu took a long puff of cigarette and said in a hoarse voice, I kissed her, but she resisted. Guanyang. And Nangxuan. The whole office fell silent for a while, then Nangxuan scratched his hair and said, Boss, that's why I overreacted so much today. Fu Chenxiu didn't speak, but his whole face was tense, and a trace of annoyance flashed in his black eyes. And Nangxuan frowned and looked at Fu Chenxiu with a hint of blame, Boss, it's only a few days away, why are you so rushing? Fu Chenxiu pinched out the cigarette in his hand in annoyance, and the veins on his hands bulged. The little girl has been avoiding me recently, she is afraid of me, and keeps a distance from me. I don't believe you can't tell that if you let me go, she will. And Nangxuan sighed melancholy. When his mind turned to the woman living opposite him, his eyebrows furrowed even more, and he felt more uneasy in his heart. He thought worriedly, these two girls should not pluck the tiger's hair. He couldn't stop the boss from losing control. Boss, you'd better give me some time, she'll be smart enough to figure it out. Guanyang could only comfort him like this, but in his opinion, the little girl really rejects such feelings from the bottom of her heart, otherwise she wouldn't be so extreme. It showed that they could not change what Fu Chenxiu decided. Have you found out who is the boss who is allergic to Xiaoxi? And Nangxuan knew that as long as it was Zhang Xiaoxi's matter, it would be engraved in his heart and he would not make such stupid mistakes, so things related to Osman thus fragrans are absolutely prohibited in Nangzi courtyard. Yes, there were Osman thus flowers in Zhang Xiaoxi's school. He replaced them all with sycamore trees with a wave of his hand, and donated a building to the school. The condition was that the school rules stated that all things with Osman thus flowers were prohibited on campus. How could such a degree of pampering cause her to be harmed? There was obviously something fishy about this. As soon as Nangxu said this, Fu Chenxiu's face became dark and gloomy, and the anger in his body swept away. He turned around and stepped away. Zhang was lying in the room of his old house when he was young, with his pink fingertips on his lips, as if they still smelled of Fu Chenxiu. The kiss from the boss was played over and over again like a movie clip, making her heart beat faster. It was not the feeling of this body, but her own real feeling, the thumping, rhythmic and chaotic beating sound. What's wrong with her? Doesn't she reject other men? Why do you feel this way? Grandpa asked me to bring you porridge when you were young. Fu Ling went in without knocking. Zhang Xiaoxiao came back to his senses immediately, turned his head to look at Fu Ling who appeared in his room, and asked, why haven't you left yet? Fu Ling. Zhang Xiaoxiao, do you have any conscience? After all, we have grown up as childhood sweethearts, and you are just waiting for me to leave. It's a shame that I brought you food. Zhang Xiao said, there are servants at home, so you don't need to send them over. Fu Ling. You are sick, I don't care about you. Fu Ling took a deep breath and did not argue with her. Put the porridge in your hand, scoop it out, blow it to cool, and pass it to her. Zhang Xiao's face still looked sick, and he opened his mouth to drink porridge. Corpse fraud system, host, in danger, in danger. Zhang Xiao immediately spit out the porridge in his mouth, stared at the bowl of porridge, and said, Fu Ling, there is something wrong with this porridge. Fu Ling. Thank you Ruanyan Bao for the reward, he, today is still the 4th update. Piao collected book reviews and became restless. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After wearing the book, I became the group favorite. Author, Little Ginger. Chapter 63. Chapter 63 Don't scare me. Fu Ling's hands holding the porridge were frozen in mid-air, and his handsome face was pale. Young kid, don't scare me, I'm watching the porridge being cooked. Zhang Xiao was not sure if there was anything wrong with the porridge. Her delicate eyebrows were furrowed. She took the porridge in his hand and smelled it first. There was no smell of osmanthus or any peculiar smell, so she became confused. System, host, you will be in danger of life in 5 seconds. Jiangxi. As soon as the system finished speaking, the glass window broke and made a loud noise. Xiaoxi, be careful. Fu Ling reacted very quickly and protected Jiangxi in his arms. Zhang Xiao's mind went blank and he allowed Fu Ling to protect her in his arms. The Fu family's bodyguards rushed over as soon as they heard the sound of broken glass, forming a circle around Zhang Xiao and the others. Everyone had a wooden warehouse in their hands. Xiao, are you okay? Fu Ling asked with a pale face, with cold sweat on his forehead. Zhang Xiao was indeed frightened. What happened just now? Was it an assassination? Who wants to kill herself and why? Just thinking about it makes her hair stand on end. I'm fine. Zhang Xiao came back to his senses and answered Fu Ling, you're fine. Zhang Xiao didn't say the last word at all, because she touched the thing she was most familiar with in the real world. Blood. Her mind exploded on the spot, with panic, uneasiness, worry, and all kinds of emotions rushing in. The already hoarse voice was stained with tears and trembled. Fu Ling, where are you injured? Tell me. When Fu Chenexai rushed to the hospital, Zhang Xiao was sitting outside the operating room, crying. Mr. Fu was there to comfort her. Zhang Xiao had never experienced anything like this before. She was so frightened that she was at a loss. Crying was her only way to vent. Suddenly, a tall shadow enveloped her. Zhang Xiao raised her head slightly and looked at the person standing in front of her with eyes that were red and swollen from crying. Her eyes suddenly lit up, like a person who had fallen into the sea and had been wandering on the sea for a long time. It was like suddenly seeing land. Hold the man's legs with both hands, bury his head in his thighs, and call softly, Uncle Wu. At that sound, the fifth uncle lieutenant general felt all the grievances, fear, uneasiness, and dependence on the man in front of him. Fu Chenexai pursed his thin lips, his eyes were deep, and he stroked her head with his big palm. It's okay, Uncle Wu is here. Yeah, Zhang Xiao replied in a sobbing voice. Zhang was frightened when he was young. He leaned on Fu Chenexai's lap and fell asleep. His whole body was still frighteningly hot. As a result, the two younger members of the Fu family were both hospitalized, and each of the Fu family members looked uglier than the other. Fu Qiuacheo said with a gloomy face, after testing the ballistics, we found that it was fired from the villa next door. One of the servants died. Fu Shenzhen continued to add, we have investigated the details of the dead servant, and there is no problem. Someone should have killed him and disguised him as him to sneak into the old house to attack the child. Every word they said stabbed Fu Chenexai in the heart. The same thing happened when he went back to investigate Osmanthus fragrans. All traces were wiped out and no clue was left. Before these people were found, Jiangxi would be in danger every day, and Heron's face darkened just thinking about him like this. He would not allow or tolerate the slightest danger to her. I will start investigating, Fu Chenexai said in a deep voice. Thank you, pumpkin cake, meow, lotus mist, guardianship. Listening to the soft warmth of the rolling clouds, the girl who loves eating lollipops, the law-abiding children, Wu Ran, floating clouds, rainbow on rainy days, twilight, Shuirishan, the lord of Yuchan palace, young hero, Yuling, Yan Ran, little cutie, am I pretty? How do I look at you? I believe Chen Xiao, Korean speaking, proudly read it. I have a recommendation, vote for a name that is not worthy of emotion. End of this chapter. After wearing the book, I became the group favorite. Author, Little Ginger. Chapter 64. Chapter 64 Nightmare. It was already early in the morning when Zhang Xiao woke up again. The first thing he did when he woke up was to get out of bed and see Fu Ling. Where do you want to go? Fu Chenexai's slightly cold voice sounded. Zhang Xiao's body paused slightly when she got out of bed. A tall man stood in front of her. He stretched out his long arms and put the person back on the hospital bed. His cold eyes stared at her. Fu Ling is okay. Are you okay? If you have a fever, go see him tomorrow. Zhang Xiao looked at Fu Chenxiao blankly, bit his dry lips, and said in a pitiful voice, Uncle Wu, I'm afraid. Fu Chenxiao leaned over and touched her cheek. His voice was low and hoarse, don't be afraid, I'm here. Uncle Wu, would you like to sleep with me? Zhang Xiao was extremely afraid and pulled on his clothes. Okay, Fu Chenxiao's eyebrows were gentle and he lay down next to him. Fortunately, it was a VIP ward and the hospital bed was not too crowded. As soon as Fu Chenxiao lay down on him, Zhang Shi crawled into his arms like a kitten and lay in his arms in the most comfortable way, seeking protection. Zhang Xiao can't tell whether she wants to get close to the boss or whether this body wants to get close to the boss. She is really scared, and the boss has a reassuring aura, at least she can feel at ease. Leaning against Fu Chenxiao, Zhang Xiao grabbed the corner of his clothes with her little hands and slowly closed her eyes. Perhaps I was frightened too much during the day. Perhaps it's the cause of a cold. Zhang Xiao leaned against him and fell asleep soon after. He breathed shallowly, but he slept extremely uneasily and curled up into a ball. Fu Chenxiao opened a pair of cold and sharp eyes, turning sideways to wrap someone in his arms. His deep eyes were filled with sad emotions, which made people feel distressed. Zhang had been sleeping restlessly since she was a child, always immersed in a dream. In the dream, she was lying in an unknown place, and there was always a man's voice talking to her in her ears. You are really cruel, little one. Child, do you hate me? Little girl, it doesn't matter how much you hate me, as long as you wake up. When I was young, I was so lonely. Are you lonely? How about I come to stay with you? Zhang Xiao wanted to open his eyes to see who was talking to him, but he couldn't. The fever has reached 40 degrees now. Why hasn't the fever gone down? Fu Chenxiao's eyes were anxious, with faint signs of anger. Guanyang frowned and looked at Zhang Shi, who was confused due to fever, with a solemn expression. Due to allergies and fright, it might not be easy to reduce the fever. Boss, give Xiao Xiao physical cooling. Within a few minutes, the nurse came over with ice packs and placed them on various parts of Zhang Shishi's body. After Fu Chenxiao waited for the nurse to do it, he stayed by Zhang Shishi's side. Guanyang looked at Fu Chenxiao's appearance. His handsome face was covered with scum, and his eyes were dark circles from staying up late. He looked very haggard. He hadn't seen him like this in almost 8 years. I think I saw him like this when I was 10 years old. I don't know who gave him a piece of sweet-scented osmanthus cake. At that time, the little girl was allergic and fainted. She lay in the intensive care unit for 2 days. During those 2 days, he saw when it came to Fu Chenxiao, who was the most vulnerable, that was when the expression of fear first appeared on Fu Chenxiao's face. Boss, I'm going to see that boy Fu Ling. If you need anything, ring the bell. Guanyang left the ward after leaving the message and went to see Fu Ling. There's still 1 chapter to go, I don't know if I can get it out. Woohoo! End of this chapter. After wearing the book, I became the group favorite. Author, Little Ginger. Chapter 65. Chapter 65. Chapter 65. It's so embarrassing. Fu Ling sat on the hospital bed and asked Guanyang to check his wounds. He didn't forget to ask about Zhang Xiao's condition. Uncle Guan, is Xiao Xiao okay? Is she not injured? Your 5th uncle is taking care of me. It's okay. Guanyang treated the wound and didn't forget to praise him. You did a good job this time. You've grown up. Fu Ling grinned. That's right, my 5th uncle is my 5th uncle's lifeblood. I understand that I can't let my 5th uncle get hurt even if I get hurt, but this time I must ask for a favor from my 5th uncle. Guanyang smiled helplessly. This boy is really smart. Your 5th uncle will agree to whatever you ask for this time. After all, you saved his life. Chu Hanyu hadn't seen Zhang Ziaxi for a few days and didn't answer his phone calls. He was worried that Zhang Ziaxi had committed something and Fu Jianxiu had him deal with it, so he went to Nangzi courtyard to stay as before. I squatted there for at least 2 hours, but I didn't see Fu Jianxiu coming out, so I wondered if there was something wrong with the itinerary in my hand. Lu Yan watched the villa go around, as if trying to figure out how to get in, but she was afraid of running into Fu Jianxiu. Finally, she gritted her teeth and prepared to climb over the wall to get admitted. However, the wall of Nangzi courtyard was not as high as usual. She looking at those high walls in despair, his eyes were constantly looking around for a place to enter. Until his eyes finally stopped at a corner, the expression on Chu Hanyu's face changed wonderfully. He walked to the corner with small steps, looked at the dog hole that was just big enough to accommodate her, gritted his teeth, and said on the spot, "Zhang Xiaoxiao, for you my noble daughter is here to you, you must treat me well in the future." After saying these words, she squatted down on the ground and dug her head into the dog hole. Her head passed through, but she was stuck there and couldn't move. Chu Hanyu. She was stuck in a dog hole for the first time in her 18-year life. It was so embarrassing that she had to call in foreign aid to save herself. And Nangxuan had not rested for a long time in the past 2 days because he was investigating Zhang Ziaxi's affairs. His eyes were filled with red bloodshot eyes. When he saw a buttocks twisting there, he suddenly felt that all the fatigue was gone. With a cigarette in his mouth, he grabbed someone who was stuck and used force, and the person was pulled out. The person who was in pain still looked unhappy, and Xiaoxian, you want to kick me, do you want to break it off? Do you understand what it means to be so violent that you will be single for the rest of your life? And Nangxuan was leaning against the wall with a smile on his face, smoking a cigarette and looking at someone who was getting angry. He smiled and said, "Na Yuniu, if the door is not open, why are you trying to get into a dog hole?" Chu Hanyu patted the weeds on her body and replied, "I came to see Xiao Xiao to see if she had made any mistakes. She was imprisoned by Uncle Fu Wu. I couldn't contact her on the phone and she didn't come to school. I'm worried about her. By the way, Uncle Fu Wu is at home, so you can help me get out of bed. She was not at home when she was young. She was hospitalized with allergies and fever. You have to see her go to the hospital." In Guanyang Hospital, and Nangxuan turned around and left after saying that. Chu Hanyu grabbed him, pouted, and frowned, and Xiaoxian, aren't you going to send me there? Take a taxi there, I have something else to do, and Nangxuan pushed her fingers away and walked forward. Chu Hanyu stood there, looking at his empty hands, and smiled bitterly. Did he still find his love? So I have started to slowly distance myself from her. The last chapter is over, good night. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After wearing the book, I became the group favorite. Author, Little Ginger. Chapter 66. Chapter 66. Chapter 66. Fifth Uncle, can you please let yourself go? When Chu Hanyu rushed to the hospital, Zhang Xiao had just woken up. Her face was pale and there was no blood at all, and her eyes were dull. At first glance, it seemed that she had been greatly frightened and felt very distressed. He walked forward and hugged her. "Ours, don't be afraid that I will come." The sudden hug brought Zhang Xiao back to his senses slightly, and he woke up from the nightmare just now. His voice was hoarse after illness. "Hanyu, you are here." "Nonsense, why don't I come? You haven't come to school for 2 days. I'm worried about you. I thought you were locked up by Uncle Fu Wu. I've been squatting in your Nangzi courtyard for several hours and I haven't seen Uncle Fu come out. I'm worried about you. It's like a dog hole to get in, and everything is lost. Zhang Ziaxi. Where did this living treasure come from? Fujinek Sayu. He is so scary. Chu Hanyu complained bitterly about his sad experience, but still did not forget to care about Zhang Xiao. Xiao Xiao, isn't your face disfigured? No, Fujinek Sayu's cold voice sounded. Zhang Xiao Xiao turned to look at Fujinek Sayu. The boss seemed to be more concerned about whether there would be scars and disfigurement than she was. His tone made it seem as if those red spots were growing on his face. Fifth uncle, can you call me? A flash of emotion quickly passed through Fujinek Sayu's cold eyes, and he stared at her for a few seconds with his eyes as deep as ink, his thin lips slightly parted, and his low alcohol and hoarse voice revealed a little bit of an alluring flavor. When I was young. Zhang Xiao closed his eyes and listened to these two simple words. His heart contracted violently, and a sad breath covered his whole body, coming from the perception of this body. Uncle Wu, please let yourself go. Boom. Fujinek Sayu's dark pupils shrank rapidly, the whites of his eyes were scarlet, his facial nerves were tense, and the blood vessels around his temples protruded. He said each word through gritted back molars. I can't let it go. How can you let me let it go? Child, you are so cruel. You left me cruelly. You are cruel enough to let me experience life without you in the future. So, I can't let myself go, and I can't let you go even more. We will go to together, and we will go to heaven together. You and I will never be separated from each other, do you understand? Fujinek Sayu's long, well-jointed fingers pinched her jaw hard, with that fierce look in his eyes, he wanted to tear her bones apart into her belly. Zhang Xiao was pinched so hard that his own consciousness returned. He looked at Fujinek Sayu with clear pupils and said with difficulty, Uncle Wu, it hurts. Fujinek Sayu's face stiffened, a trace of annoyance flashed in his dark eyes, he released Zhang Xiaoxi's jaw, and there was disappointment under his eyelids. What do you want to eat? Uncle Wu will ask you to bring it to you. Anything is fine. Zhang Xiaoxiao said cautiously, her lower jaw was red and painful, reminding her that the boss just lost control. What happened just now? Can she really fuse this body? I'm going out to make a call. Fujinek Sayu turned around and left, his back showing loneliness. Chu Hanyu was completely frightened on the sidelines. It wasn't until Fujinek Sayu left that she regained her composure. Her face turned pale and she spoke with a vibrato, when I was young, your fifth uncle, what happened just now, it was so scary. Zhang Xiao. She also wanted to know what happened just now and wanted to see if there was surveillance. Fujinek Sayu was leaning against the wall of the hospital corridor, his eyes half closed to hide his emotions, holding a cigarette in one hand, feeling lonely and deserted. Ours, nothing matters as long as you are there. Thank you, Shi Miao, Ran, Mr. Jane Eyre, your beauty, the sea reflects the blue of the sky, I have a name that is indescribable with emotion, Lian Wu, Jade Chan is a cute little girl, we are still together, I read it, I feel free and easy, Wu am I pretty? It has been recommended since birth. On a new day, votes are cast, book reviews are activated, and collections are activated. Moi. End of this chapter. After wearing the book, I became the group favorite. Author, Little Ginger. Chapter 67. Chapter 67. Chapter 67. Let's go to the brain department to have a look. Zhang Xiaoxiao, are you kidding me? You don't know what you just said. Chu Hanyu's eyes were as big as a bell, with an expression on his face that said, brother, are you kidding me? Zhang Xiaoxiao's delicate brows furrowed slightly, with a serious look on his face and no hint of joking, I really don't remember. Chu Hanyu. How about we go to the brain department to have a look? Zhang Xiao rolled his eyes at her, I'm allergic, not my brain. Chu Hanyu said. She heard that fever can burn out the brain. However, she could only mumble a few words in her mind, fearing that someone would get angry and hit her, so she still answered her question, tell Uncle Fu Wu, Uncle Wu, please let yourself go. After Chu Hanyu finished speaking, he looked at Zhang Ziaxi with wide eyes, paying attention to the changes on her face. Zhang Xiao analyzed this sentence in his mind. What did Miss Baiyu Eguang mean by saying this? Why should he let the boss let him go? With these questions, Zhang Xiao called the system to see what the tower could know. Zhang Shi, system, please come out. Corpse fraud system, host, I don't know, it's not within my business scope. Zhang Xiao was dismissed in 2 or 3 sentences. Zhang Xiao. Damn it, you are paralyzed because it is not within the scope of your business, so why did you save me in the first place? System, a vulgar woman. Xiao, do you know anything? Chu Hanyu asked tentatively. Zhang Xiao was confused, what do you know? I know Uncle Fu Wu likes. Chu Hanyu really wants to tell Uncle Fu Wu that he likes you. The kind that she doesn't want if she likes it, but she doesn't have the guts? Moreover, and Xiaoxian had specifically warned her not to get involved in their affairs. She was afraid that Uncle Fu would be very afraid of him. So if it reaches your mouth, you can only swallow it. Changing the topic, when I was young, I heard that Fu Ling got injured while trying to save you. Ye Zhang Xiao said with a heavy heart. He had not yet visited Fu Ling and didn't know how injured he was. Chu Hanyu is a person who has been well protected since she was a child, so she still feels unbelievable about the assassination. The circle of friends between the two is very narrow, and there is little chance to offend anyone. Who wants to harm Zhang Ziaxi? Xiao, you guess that I want to harm you? I can't guess. Zhang Xiao was so confused about her assassination that she couldn't be too confused. She was a person who should have died in the first 3 chapters, and there was no plot behind it. How could she guess the plot behind it? The top cannon fodder is talking about her. Zhang Xiaoshen was lying on the hospital bed helplessly, which was a sign of despair for the future. Xiao, what are you going to do with that woman? Chu Hanyu thought of the woman who was still in his apartment. She had been living there for several days, and she didn't see that Zhang Xiao had any arrangements for her. She couldn't keep her all the time, even though they no shortage of money. But she really didn't like that Mo Zhangxiang, the dislike came from her bones. When mentioning Mo Zhangxiang, Zhang Xiaoxiu's eyes lit up. Yes, why did she forget that there was such a person? It was all because the boss had been so abnormal recently. Ignore her for now. Just eat and drink and watch her. I have arrangements. Chu Hanyu looked at Zhang Ziaxi with a hint of worry. Xiao, do you have any big plans? You must not mess with Uncle Fu Wu. The signal is not good on the train, my dears. End of this chapter. After wearing the book, I became the group favorite. Author, Little Ginger. Chapter 68. Chapter 68 Gossip. Zhang Xiao. If she wants to leave, she will definitely provoke the boss. Chu Hanyu could tell from her expression that she wanted to cause trouble, and her heart skipped a beat in fear. When we are young, can we stop making trouble? Zhang Shi. Child, I'm serious. Don't challenge Uncle Fu Wu's majesty, okay? You see, Uncle Fu is really good to you. Besides being strict with you, Chu Hanyu has a strong desire to survive, hoping to persuade his best friend. Zhang Xiao began to remain silent. Chu Hanyu was in a heavy mood. Looking at Zhang Xiao, he didn't even listen to her words. Zhang Xiao stayed in the hospital for a whole week before being discharged. Fu Chenxiao stayed with her almost every step of the way. Matters in the company were also handled at the hospital. After the assassination, it was impossible to return to the old house, so he followed the boss back to Nangziyuan. Her efforts to gain freedom failed, but fortunately she still had a trump card. Back in the room, Zhang Xiao was stunned on the spot, feeling depressed. There is an extra door in her room, and behind this door is Fu Chenxiao's room. The boss wants to monitor her. Fu Chenxiao stood next to her, and the changes on Zhang Xiaoxi's face did not escape his eyes. Shen Yi's stern face became a little tense, and he explained in a cold voice, "I'm afraid you are in danger, don't worry, I won't come over." Zhang Xiaoxiao bit her lip and clenched her fists, her face still looking unhappy. After hearing her explanation, she felt better. "Uncle Wu, I understand. Have a good rest." Fu Chenxi rubbed the top of her hair, turned around and left her room. Zhang Xiao looked at the door and lay down on the bed in despair. He was as motionless as a dead dog. Nothing had gone well these days. Hum. The phone vibrated, and when Zhang Xiao opened it, Chu Hanyu's loud voice came out, "Xiao Xiao, Bagua, de Bagua." "Oh," Zhang Xiao responded without much interest. "How about you be excited? This is really a big gossip about Zhou Yuling," Chu Han said in a very excited tone, or in other words, he was very excited now. Zhang Xiao weakly cooperated with her. "What's wrong with her?" "Here, you didn't read the news. Something happened to their pharmaceutical company. I heard that the newly developed Yao can eat people." Eating dead people. Zhang Xiao was a doctor and she respected life very much. She still felt a little sad when she heard the news of such a dead person. "That's right, it means eating dead people. I heard that this is a drug that is still in the trial stage. They dare to produce it directly. Now something happens, they are definitely dead. Don't you dislike her? This news is very important to you." "Good news." Zhang Shi didn't feel very happy. They dared to use the medicine in the trial stage. They deserved such consequences and did not deserve sympathy. Everyone should respect life, but now she is Bai Yueguang and has to cooperate. Well, she deserves it, and that's a happy thing indeed. I'm still young. If something happens to your woman's family, she will definitely come and ask Uncle Fu Wu to help her. Please tell Uncle Fu not to help her." As soon as Chu Hanyu finished speaking, Zhang Xiaoxi's door rang. "Enter." Fu Chenxi's tall figure appeared in her room, and his voice was deep, "When I'm young, I'll go out for a while, so don't run around." End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After wearing the book, I became the group favorite. Author, Little Ginger. Chapter 69. Chapter 69. Chapter 69. Will you marry me? Uncle Wu, are you going to help Zhou Yuling? Zhang Xiaoxiao asked subconsciously. Fu Chenxiao stared at her intently, nodding lightly. Can you? Zhang Xiaoxi bit his tongue and managed to get his words back. Uncle Wu, can you bring me back a bag of spicy strips? Fu Chenxiao. Good. Fu Chenxiao turned around and left. Zhang Xiaoxiao stuck out her tongue. She had bitten her and it hurt her. If she didn't bite herself, she could guarantee that her words would be unreliable. It is a good thing that the boss is looking for Zhou Yuling. The more women around the boss, the better. It is best if he can marry Zhou Yuling where he is, so she doesn't have to worry so much. If they can make a baby again, it will be perfect, so it is well worth the pain. Fu Chenxi rushed to where Zhou Yuling was talking about and frowned slightly. Zhou Yuling saw him appear and stepped forward immediately. The delicate makeup on her face was gone. Without makeup, her face looked more haggard. With her watery eyes, she felt a bit pity for her. Brother Fu. Fu Chenxi consciously kept his distance from her, his voice was filled with his usual indifference, and he got straight to the point. How do you want me to help you? Zhou Yuling's eyes were red and she looked at Fu Chenxi pitifully. Brother Fu, would you please marry me? Only if you marry me will our family survive this incident. I know you don't like me, so just treat it like that fake marriage. Can you please help me because I have been with you for so many years? Fu Chenxi was very indifferent. He looked at her like a stranger and his tone was cruel. He didn't give Zhou Yuling any face. I thought you were smart enough, but I didn't expect you to be so stupid. Zhou Yuling's face turned pale and bloodless in an instant. Her heart was taken out, but it was so that he even shook her body. She bit her white lips and said, "Brother Fu, I really like you, why don't you even give me this chance?" Fu Chenxiu's dark eyes were full of disgust for her. "I will help you fill the gap in funds. It is based on the long-term friendship between the two families." Zhou Yuling looked at his cold face, and her heart felt as if it had been placed in a refrigerator. She stopped beating in the cold, and even her mind was unclear. "Fu Chenxiu, I know you like Zhang Xiao, right?" Fu Chenxiu's cold eyes swept across hers sharply, and a cold air emanated from his body. Zhou Yuling's lips curled up sarcastically, her eyes full of resentment. "Fu Chenxiu, maybe you hide it well, but I've been with you for so many years, even a fool can see it." "No, that little Zhang didn't see it when he was young. Come out, otherwise I wouldn't have escaped from you until now. You said what would happen if she knew how you felt about her. She would definitely think you were a pervert, and then she would run away from you at all costs. Even if she doesn't run away from you, the rumors and gossip outside will drown you. What do you call it, incest? If you want her not to face those rumors, then lock her up. Can you lock her up for the rest of her life? You will not get any blessings from being together. So, Brother Fu, how about marrying me? If you don't love me, that's fine as long as I love you. I won't object if you want to be with her." "Okay." Zhou Yuling approached Fu Chenxiu sickly. "The signal on the train is not good, so I can't read your messages. Thank you all for your recommendation votes. If you still vote, I love you." End of this chapter. After wearing the book, I became the group favorite. Author, Little Ginger. Chapter 70. Chapter 70 Fulfilling My Last Wish. Fu Chenxiu's dark eyes were covered with a layer of frost and gloom, and his whole body was filled with an inaccessible coldness. He pinched Zhou Yuling's slender neck with one hand, and the muscles on his forearm bulged. With just a slight exertion, Zhou Yuling would be stunned. "Return." The cold voice was faint, but there was a terrifying anger in it. "So you are threatening me now?" Zhou Yuling's originally pale face had turned the color of a pig. Because of difficulty breathing, the zigzag veins on her forehead bulged out, but she still answered without fear of death, "Yes." Fu Chenxiu put more force on his hands, and his facial expression was like Shuro locked in hell. "Very good, since you don't want to live, there is no point in living." Zhou Yuling's pupils dilated, and her calmness was replaced by fear, and her eyes also showed her sadness. He had been with this man for so many years, and it was really ironic that he had no mercy at all and wanted to kill her. The brain was full and began to lack oxygen, and her breath was also flowing away. Death was really close to her. Could she close her eyes and accept it happily? No, she would never accept it. Even if she couldn't get Fu Chenxiu, she wouldn't take advantage of that little Zhang Xiao. Zhou Yuling's obsession made her suddenly open her eyes and sneer at the corner of her lips. "Fu Chenxiu, if you kill me, then the matter between you and Zhang Xiaoxi will be fermented and magnified in every corner of Ruchen in the next second. I can't bear to be hurt by your little baby." The snake hit 7 inches, and Zhang Xiaoxiao is Fu Chenxiu 7 inches. Even if he dies himself, Zhang Xiaoxiao will not be harmed at all. As expected, it was better for Fu Chenxiu to let her go, but the hostility around him had not dissipated, and he stared at her with cold eyes. "The Zhou family has been around for too long." Fu Chenxiu's simple words, Zhou Yuling understood the meaning. Zhang Xiaoxiao was his weakness, and the Zhou family was also her weakness. "Help me this time, I will never say another word to leave Ruchen or come back." Zhou Yuling lowered her head, her long hair blocking her sinister and unwilling face. "Good." Fu Chenxiu agreed to her because of the long-standing friendship between the Zhou family and the Fu family. Letting Zhou Yuling go tonight was already the biggest concession. Brother Fu is fulfilling my last wish, okay, Zhou Yuling said in a humble voice. Fu Chenxiu stared at him coldly, his long eyebrows furrowed, an expression of impatience already appeared on his face, and he looked at her with an indifferent attitude, as if she were looking at garbage. Zhou Yuling's heart was stung severely. She had never seen tenderness in his eyes, not even a little bit. All his tenderness was given to Zhang Xiao, but none of that mattered anymore. Zhou Yuling took a step forward slightly and approached Fu Chenxiu. Brother Fu, my wish is. Fu Chenxiu was driving back to Nangziyuan, his stern face was gloomy, he was holding the steering wheel with one hand, his bones were protruding, his breath was cold, and there was a trace of blood on the corner of his mouth, which was broken. It originally took half an hour to drive back to Nangziyuan, but Fu Chenxiu drove back in more than 10 minutes. Have you slept yet? The housekeeper, who had not yet gone to bed, helped Fu Chenxiu get his coat and replied, Miss has already rested. Fu Chenxiu looked at the spicy strips in his hand, squinted his eyes, went upstairs, opened the door of Zhang Shishi's room and went in. He saw a soft light flashing in the eyes of the sleeping Zhang Shishi, and lovingly stroked the broken hair on her forehead. No want to eat spicy strips? Why did you fall asleep? Thank you, Xin Chuan, Dai, Kahi, blueberry jam, since the birth, your show, grab the hem of Xiangxian's clothes, the sea reflects the blue sky, pumpkin cake, read it, I will pour it with an aha, high quality, Korean, squandering, girl purifier, Zhang Chun Chun, Xian, Gazi, the young man in the wilderness, Mo Kayan, King Gluo, Wei Ai, etc. are recommended by my friends. Today I will continue to ask for votes, book reviews, collections, and all kinds of requests. Moi. End of this chapter.